Hi, my name's Carmen Rodriguez, and I reside down in Union City. Anyway, I get $133.40 a month supplemental security income from the state of California. I get $909.40 total, and it is, even being in government-assisted housing, it's still very hard to make ends meet. I collect bottles and cans, and it took me at least 3.5 months to collect $47 worth. I have to. My current counselor and each of my previous counselors does and do say that I need a pet, but I have to use credit cards for most pet-related things, and at that I have to have a relative or a friend help me to pay the minimum due each month on on most of the 2 of the 3 credit cards. Anyway. I don't buy clothes except those that are given to me, and except my shoes, and that's because one of my brothers gave me some money to buy shoes. So anyway, and I don't get haircuts either, except when a friend sent me $30 last November for my birthday, and I used 20 of it to get a haircut, and that was my last haircut. First time in 11 and a half months I had one. So anyway, I just hope that they will strongly consider any and all increase to SSI, because people just cannot make it on what they are getting now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rebecca Gonzalez, National Association of Social Workers, California chapter. Social workers work with people in the community every day that are having a hard time making ends meet and just having their basic necessities met. So we joined the chorus in supporting an increase to these grants and also to reinstating the cost of living adjustment. I do also feel that, and we could see by the numbers, that we do have money in the budget. Over the past few years, we have restored some of the services that were cut in the recession, but this particular area of the budget has really lagged behind as far as regaining some of the ground that has been lost. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Brenda Blannon, and I'm here in support of a raise for SSI. I keep my brother James Coney. He has short-term memory loss, which is a form of Alzheimer's. If he had to live by himself, he wouldn't be able to make it on $822 a month. That would be just enough to pay for a room. And he wouldn't have nothing to eat, wouldn't be able to pay PG&E, wouldn't have nothing to cook on because he wouldn't be able to afford to cook. So nobody can live on $800 and some dollars a month. I'm asking you to give Social Security people a fair amount of money where they can live decently on. And also, you should give them food stamps. A lot of old people eating dog food. So I'm asking you, please give a raise. Be fair in your judgment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Joseph Berry. I won't repeat my hardships growing up on SSI. I think people have done well articulating what being on SSI means already. Luckily for me, I was born at a time when historically our response to disability was not institutionalization, if you will. I was able to make something of myself through work and education, obviously. And what I want to say is that because the amount are so low now, what we are seeing is that we are having a movement towards reinstitutionalization, if you will, meaning that these people are having to choose, us are having to choose between living in their home independently or being in a place in which they're being provided for because that's all that their money will allow. I will say that the bottom line is that $17 is not enough money, and that anything less or anything continuing to regress as zero or further cuts, if you will be a continued trend and pattern towards reinstitutionalization of persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Corey Bagoni, and I work at the St. Anthony Foundation in San Francisco in the Tenderloin. I'm 23 years old, and I'm ashamed to be a part of a country and a part of a state that allows our SSI participants to be treated this way. As we've heard from many people, having $20, $25 to spend for us a month for food, clothing, toiletries, transportation, medicine, that's something to be ashamed of, to treat people that way. Just as representing as a young, concerned citizen of our society, I really hope that we can view each other, and especially those who are receiving SSI, in a better light. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kerry Whiteside, and I'm on SSI due to a disability, and I cut my own hair. I don't go out to restaurants or nothing, so I feel like I'm not able to give back to the community when I do them things, because I don't go to a barber to cut my hair, because I cut my own hair, and I'm just asking for increase on SSI and SP. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gwen, and I just want to tell you about SSI. SSI is not enough money because I just been on there for not even a year yet, and I see things going down here already. Okay, if it wasn't for subsidized housing, I wouldn't be able to live at all. So I just want you guys to do something about the system to make it work for everybody, including myself. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Hortensia Hopi. I'm from St. Mary Center, and I'm 85 years old, and I'm a little frustrated in how do you think we are going to live with the rent so high and our checks don't go up or down, and I have to struggle. I mean struggle. If it wasn't for the food banks, I'd be really sick. Now I got another problem. I cannot walk far. I cannot stand. So now I have to take that little extra money that I have for food for my bus fares and paratransit. I would see if he has a heart to raise it to at least $17 for everybody. Make it just something easier for us to live on, not to come and beg. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Wilma Brown, and I'm a member of St. Mary's. You know, it would be great help if SSI and SSPI would have increased the budget and also add food stamps. We need it so bad. I, too, would like to shop at Safeways, but I can't afford it. And another thing, MFG, that should come back to the kids, because my granddaughter, she doesn't get it, and we're all struggling. So please consider. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate the passion and the commitment that this panel has put forth in the effort to raise Social Security. I have been watching what you have been doing, Assemblymember Thurman, and I'm so proud of you. You know that because I tell you all the time.
Thank you.
We are from St. Mary's Center. We are from the Residents United Network. We are from the SSI Coalition. We stand behind the advocacy proposal. But I want you to consider what we have been asking for, to raise it to the poverty level. That's all that we feel that we can ask. And even that has so much pushback. But to raise it to the poverty level, that I am at the poverty level. So there's so much work to be done after this, but let us do this. I will say lastly that we sit in meetings that are just devoted to homelessness, solving homelessness, just devoted to the rental crisis, just devoted to affordable housing. And this is a piece of all that. If you pass this and you move forward, we will help solve the rest of it. So please do so. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I like to think, my name is Robert. I like to thank this committee for hearing us today. And Mr. Thurman, thank you for sponsoring the bill this year, or co-sponsoring. What I came here for, I'm part of DACFA, which is Disabled Rights Group here in Sacramento. Everything's going up, like utility, rent, housing, but not the SSI amount. to cover all that. And I know people on the streets that because they can't pay their rent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Kevin Aslin. I'm with the Coalition of California Welfare Rights Organizations, and we support bringing SSI up to 100% of the federal poverty level. And also the same should be done for CalWorks recipients who are also living at 30% of the federal poverty level. And the other thing we should do is cash out food stamps. Right now, every year we leave on the table $1.4 billion, and that's every month means SSI recipients don't get $122 million. And if we do that, if we cash out, we'll bring in about $4 billion into California, and that would create 40,000 jobs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Libby Sanchez on behalf of the Public Authorities for In-Home Supportive Services. 80% of our consumer recipients are on SSI and SSP, and providing for this increase would also enable them to have a modicum of increased dignity with which they may live. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Becky Gershon. I work for the San Francisco and Marin Food Bank. We have about 300 food pantries in both San Francisco and Marin counties where people come weekly to pick up groceries to take home, and a really significant portion of those folks are people that are on SSI. And at the current levels, we're forcing people to make, impossible choices between, medication, food, personal expenses, expenses that everybody should be able to pay adequately on their own. So I support the advocacy ask that everybody's talking about right now, and thank you for listening to everybody's concerns.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shanti Prasad. I'm here from Alameda County Community Food Bank, and I'm a part of the Californians for SSI Coalition. As you all already know, a lot of people are suffering on SSI, and the food bank serves a lot of them, many of them seniors, and it's contributing to homelessness. But I just learned a fact that I didn't know a couple of weeks ago, and it's about Texas. And you'd think people in Texas who are on SSI wouldn't be doing as well as people in California, right? I mean, Texas usually may not have as good programs, but people in Texas on SSI are living far above the federal poverty level, and that just surprised me. And I'm like, what? Texas? California can do better than Texas.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dolores Tejada with Community Resources for Independent Living. I'm the community organizer there. Our organization is also part of California Partnership and Californians for SSI. I'm here also we serve Southern Alameda County, and I'm here also representing the hundreds and thousands of people who can't be here because they're in institutions such as hospitals, prisons, and nursing homes. And so the folks with disabilities that we serve, the majority of them come into our center. They are recipients of SSI and SSP, and also the majority of the folks that come in are looking for housing. So this particularly relates to housing because the amount that's given per month now isn't even enough to afford a studio apartment in the Bay Area. So this issue connects to a lot of other things, and bringing people out of poverty and making sure that people do not end up in nursing homes. Just recently, about 3 weeks ago, we actually had someone who was homeless, who had a disability, come into our center, and he purposefully and intentionally did something so that we would have to call the police, which is our last resort. But the reason why he did this was because he didn't have housing, and the next day it was set to rain, and so he would have rather gone to jail, to a prison, so that he could have shelter than to be homeless. And that's the kind of situation in folks that is not that extreme, that we really need to solve by making sure that we increase, that we have a COLA adjustment, and that we increase SSI and SSP. Thank you.
Thank you.
Afternoon, Assembly Members Bonta and Thurman. Thank you so much for holding this space. I'm Pete Wywordy with the California Partnership. We are part of the Californians for SSI Coalition. You've heard incredible voices from this room, and I want to just reflect a couple of other voices that have happened around the state in the last little while. There's two hearings in Los Angeles around SSI, organized by our community organizations, folks who have obviously logistical trouble getting up here, and so wanted to reflect their voices. one of which your new speaker, Anthony Rendon, came to, and he said, I am fully in support of SSI. I am fully in support of getting this back to above the poverty level, which is thrilling for us to hear. Now we're eager to see that in practice. And just a couple of notes on where we could see that money come from. You know, the governor's budget, we are thrilled that a lot of the voices in this room and the advocacy of the two of you and other folks, other strong folks, kicked the door open a little bit in the governor's budget. We have seen a little light in the darkness. Now we need to fully throated step into that and pull it all the way open so we can actually get dignity for everybody in our streets. Where that money can come from, we've talked about the $250 million going to unnecessary jails that's being talked about in this building today. The governor has put $2 billion extra dollars above and beyond into a rainy day fund that, you know, it is literally raining right now, and a lot of the folks here do not have a place to stand under. So let's put that rainy day fund to use to folks who can use it right now. $1.5 billion to buildings in California. That is money that can come to people and investing in the human infrastructure of our state. And not to mention all of the revenue solutions that are available to us and are going to be on the ballot, et cetera. So we are looking forward to you all stepping as strongly as you did last year into this little opening we've got and pushing for an SSI that gets everybody above the poverty level, so then we can have a real conversation about what we can fully be as a state. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you. I want to thank all of the speakers. You know, I have a few comments, but first I want to acknowledge my colleague, Assemblymember Bonta, you know, who all of the members of this committee have been strong advocates for increasing SSP and for closing the income inequality gap. You know, someone who's mentored me once said that when someone says something profound, you just say you want to associate yourself with the colleagues of your distinguished colleagues. And I just want to thank everyone who spoke just now in public comment and really want to associate myself with your brilliant comments. You're absolutely right. We should never ask our citizens to beg. You know, what kind of community does not care for our seniors, our elders, individuals who may have a disability? We should never allow ourselves to be in a position where our state asks anyone to choose between paying your rent, having something to eat, having to go to the food shelter, having to pay for medication. We should never have a situation where a 23-year-old who is probably our future governor has to be ashamed of her state because we do not show our actions with the values that we state, that we care about those who might be the least among us, who deserve on all of us to provide. And no disrespect to anybody from Texas or with Texas roots, but this is California, and California is a leader. And the way we lead is to put our money where our mouth is and show that we care about the people of this great state. And so I just want to thank all of you. And we should never, ever allow someone to choose jail because they feel that's the only way that they can have shelter. And we must not ever, ever, ever allow that to be our narrative. We're going to quickly take the roll. I want to give my colleagues an opportunity if they have questions to the panel or wish to give any comments on the conversation about expanding SSP for those who are on SSI. Can we take the roll?
Thurman?
Aye. All right, present.
Bonta?
I'm ready to vote.
Here.
Grove? Jones? Dr. Weber?
Here.
Thank you. I do want to see if my colleagues have questions for the panel or they want to speak on to the issue. Mr. Bonta?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank our panelists for being here, and thank you to all of our advocates, members of the public, for your participation and your engagement, and with the comments that you shared today. I think I'm going to take my chair's advice and associate myself with the comments of my distinguished colleague, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Weber, anything?
Yeah, just simply want to thank those of you who came. I know it's quite a challenge to get to the Capitol, and then it's often, you know, difficult to make your story heard in a minute. But your stories have been heard, and I want to make sure you understand that over the last few years we've had challenges in terms of dealing with SSI and SSP and wanting to try to do what's right by California. And as we rebuild California, we have to make sure that we leave no one really behind and that we have to continue to work on what we do for the least of us. Our challenge is always to make sure that the character of the state is solid, and that character is based on what we do for those who cannot do for themselves. And that's how we're judged as a state, by what we do for our children and what we do for those who are elderly and those who are disabled. And this is one step in the right direction, but clearly we have not gone far enough. And if California is to be the California that we all love and want to happen, we have to continue to down this path. So once again, thanks to staff, thank the governor for finally hearing us, and I thank you all for coming and sharing your information with us.
Thank you, Dr. Weber. Thank you, Assemblymember Bonta. On this issue, we are not taking action at this time. However, we're going to continue to look at this issue. And we are recommending that the LAO continue to collaborate with the Department of Social Services and with advocates on developing viable options for phase-in of the grant increase for individuals and for grants for both individuals and couples to keep pace with inflation on an ongoing basis. Our request to the LAO is to look at the information on possible expansions of SSI advocacy program, working with the advocates and DSS, and to consult back with this subcommittee no later than the May revision. So thank you. We are going to move to, we have a number of items today that deal with in-home supportive services. And some of our speakers reference the connection to SSI and SSP, that those who are in the IHSS program often do struggle financially with only their benefits in SSI and SSP. And so we will be taking action on an issue related to the ongoing restoration of the 7% across-the-board hours reduction. And so I do want to prepare my subcommittee members for taking action there. I'm going to go ahead and read the motion or read the recommendation and see if there's a motion from this committee to take that action. It is our recommendation that the subcommittee today will approve the continued ongoing restoration of the 7% across-the-board hours reduction with an accompanying placeholder trailer bill changes to reflect the repeal of the hours cut. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Chair Thurman,
Aye.
Bonta,
Aye.
Grove, Jones, Dr. Weber,
Aye.
has 3.
Thank you. That motion passes. That means that this committee is saying that...
Mr. Chair, down here, could I put in a few comments before we proceed?
Yes, on the issue of IHSS?
Right.
Yes, we're going to move into those discussions, but given our configuration today, we wanted to take that action and explain what it is that we are doing. So, but we are moving into the discussion about IHSS. Thank you.
I'll wait for that then.
Thank you. For those who are following along in the agenda for today, we're moving to issue 2, which is the in-home supportive services program. It's oversight over some implementation of overtime policy issues. There have been some challenges raised. We want to give the department an opportunity to speak on this subject. We have a number of advocacy groups that are here today, finance and the LAO's office, and we will also hear from the public. With that, I would ask our director, Mr. Lightbourne, and his team if they would provide us with some framing of the issue. Sir.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. I have a little bit more to say on this than in the introduction to the SSI SSP. As you know, we've operated this program for 40 years in California. It's the critical element in allowing people to remain independently in their homes. It is by far the largest such program in the country. We are one of only a couple of states that have actually rebalanced spending on long-term services and support so that a majority of our spending is on home and community-based services. 54% of our spending is home community-based services, of which 95% is the in-home supportive services program. So it's critical to us. We are projecting for 2016-2017 a caseload increase of about 5.7%, to 490,000 recipients of services in the state. The budget for 2016-2017 is proposed at $9.2 billion, of which nearly $3 billion is general fund, and this is approximately a $700 million increase from 2015-16 current year to 2016-17 budget year. I would emphasize that this is a $700 million increase. One of the major features in the program this year that I know is the subject of considerable conversation is the implementation of the Fair Labor Standards Act, overtime and travel time provisions in the law. As you know, in the budget of 2014, the details of the implementation of FLSA subject to federal court clearance were negotiated in detail between all of the parties and were enacted. And from the administration's perspective, this is settled policy. The timeline for implementation of FLSA is in the agenda package. The IHSS payroll for payment of overtime wages began February 1st, and the payroll processing for the month of February is essentially the normal flow of payrolls. So at this point, we consider implementation to be underway as expected. Ms. Carroll, Mr. Cervenka, and I are available to answer any specific questions you have, as I'm sure also Mr. Yang from Department of Finance.
Ms. Carroll, anything?
The only thing I would say is we have, as Director Lightbourne has pointed out, that we have payroll moving at the normal pace, and we've experienced for the month of February completed payroll of about 80% of all the timesheets. So that means the second half of the month, which is what we call Part B, is still catching up, but we're in good shape for meeting the normal timeframes for making payroll. The other elements that we have talked about is that we've conducted for training statewide and have trained 500 people to go out and do some training. 50% of the counties have submitted plans to us on their training activities. So we know that things are in operations, and we're seeing activities related to the workweek agreements and to the forms that are required to be filed are being done expeditiously. The counties have done a remarkable job in getting that information in the system.
Thank you. Mr. Cervenka, anything? Thank you. Continuing on this topic, we are honored to have from the County Welfare Directors Association of California, Kathy Senderling.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Kathy Senderling from the County Welfare Directors Association, and I'm actually testifying on behalf of a broad coalition that includes not just county practitioners, but also providers and consumers of IHSS services. We are respectfully requesting consideration of several changes that are detailed in your agenda, so I'll just touch on them briefly and the reasons for those and then be available to answer more in-depth questions. The implementation, as you heard, started February 1st, just this past month, for the actual overtime requirements. And we will note, and we thank Ms. Carroll's comment about the counties doing a great job to help start the implementation. There was feedback solicited on all of the documents that were put forth by the department prior to the implementation, and we were really gratified to see that some of our feedback was incorporated. However, we do think there are a number of issues with the way in which the statute was crafted in California that we're now seeing as we're rolling out this implementation that we want to bring to your attention. First, the new procedures and rules are really complex. They are very burdensome. We understand why we need to do the paperwork, why we need to make these changes, but it is very difficult for individuals to understand. And we have, as you heard, hundreds of thousands of providers in this program. 500,000 recipients, and so understanding the new complex requirements are very difficult. There are different weekly caps for different providers. There are exemptions for some consumers from the work week requirements when the provider is a parent or guardian, but not when they're a spouse or another relative provider, regardless of the level of need of the consumer. And there are very complex calculations about how to convert the number of hours that are allowed under the overtime requirements from a weekly situation up to a monthly, and then, I'm not kidding, back into a weekly number. Multiple complex calculations that must be done, and I do have a handout if you're interested in seeing sort of what's been provided. We think it's a great attempt to try to make something very complex into something more simple, but as you'll see, it remains very complex, and I can give this to your staff or to the sergeants perhaps to hand out. So while we're waiting for that, basically, as you heard, our county agencies are required to explain these new rules to both the consumers and to the providers who are enrolled in IHSS. But even with the training that we've done so far, we are seeing both consumers and providers struggle to understand these new rules. As a result, county agencies already are reporting thousands of IHSS providers who are submitting incorrect timesheets and cannot make the new rules work at this point. In Los Angeles County alone, 5,000 providers were found to be in violation of the new requirements, and that's just for the first payroll, the first half of February. Continued violations can result in suspension or termination as a provider in the program, and so consumers would have to find alternative care for their homes. Now, it's important to know that right now we're in a 3-month grace period before those violations actually start to count for individual providers. But our first priority for your consideration is to ask for an extension of this grace period from May 1st, which is just 2 months from now, to September 1st, 2016, an extra 4 months to just allow additional time for the providers and the consumers to understand the new rules and without fear of losing their providers and having to scramble. In the meantime, we also ask consideration of a few additional remedies. First, we'd like to ensure that there are statutory protections to consumers who have extraordinary needs, not the majority of our 500,000 on the program, but a small subset who have very high needs, to make sure that there's an exemption process that works for them. My colleague, Deborah Doctor, who speaks next on the panel, will get into greater detail on this, but as I noted, there's a relatively narrow set of exceptions that are granted by the department. We think there is flexibility to go further, and that it's the right thing to do to make sure that all consumers are protected. Second, we'd like to align IHSS with the FLSA policies related to the work weeks, so it will be less confusing to consumers and providers who are just trying to follow the rules. For example, right now, as you heard, we have a 2 times per month pay period, but it's not biweekly. It's not 26 equal pay periods. It's 2 per month. And so a month that is 28 or 29 days, like we just got out of in February, and the month that we've now hit in 31 days, require different calculations to figure out how many overtime hours you're actually allowed to work during the payroll period. In addition, we'd like social workers to be able to authorize the services by the work week as well. Again, keeping to that 7-day work week rather than worrying about the size of the month can really help make this less complex for our providers and our consumers. And we'd also like to align the weekly cap in the hours that a provider can work. Currently, providers have to figure out whether they fall under a 66-hour per week cap or a 70.75-hour cap, depending on their structure and the number of other providers serving the consumers that they provide and the number of consumers to whom they provide services. It can be very confusing. Just 2 more items. Fourth, we'd ask to allow for certain tasks that really can only be accurately accounted for after they actually occur, such as medical accompaniment, waiting in the doctor's office, to just be paid in arrears and outside of this structure. And finally, we're asking to allow waiver clients, a small group, around 4,000 people, who are currently who are also subject to the FLSA rules, but who cannot access the provider registry through our public authorities, to be able to do so that they can more easily find alternative and additional providers should they need them due to the requirements. We think that taken together, these items will reduce confusion and really allow for us to take that step back, continue working with the administration, continue working with the consumer and provider representatives and public authorities to ensure that everyone understands the rules and knows how to do the math. And finally, we think that this has the best likelihood of reducing harm to consumers that we think is going to be very real when these things take effect in May and the violations start to toll for people who are just trying to do the paperwork right. It's unrelated to the services that they're providing. Thank you so much for your indulgence, and we appreciate it.